Hello and happy weekend and good morning to everybody. I'm Dr. Catherine Horton and I would like to present something about black budgets and
Hello
Brexit.
and happy
Okay,
weekend.
fantastic. In the background I could hear that the audio is working. This is great. I let it run in the background. So I will try to keep an eye on the chat today as much as I can. But I wanted to show you a couple of things that are very, very important. In 2019, I would like to divert the entire conversation onto the financial realm, and there's a very, very good, very important interview with Catherine Austin Fitts coming up, and it will be published on her Solari report and also on my channel. And that is actually very, that will kick off 2019 as also the look into finance and bringing the targeting or the genocide problem, I should say. So the targeted individuals, the Holocaust victims, the genocide, together with the financial arm of the entire thing and what has been going wrong in finance. And we need to really merge the two to be able to present a cogent court case where we can show, well, in principle, we shouldn't have to show it, but we might as well, and I think we have to explain the scale of this. We have to also explain the financial background, which is why we need to team up with financial investigators as well. And so the interview with Catherine Austin Fitts is definitely coming. The other thing I would like to announce is because my finances are being severely attacked, and my consulting business is again being fiercely attacked, to the point where, for example, yesterday I was tortured with the chip implants. They heat these chip implants simultaneously. They cause agonizing pain. And bit by bit, this causes a wearing out of my nervous system and brain damage. And they have been ramping up the brain damage, the remote control brain damage quite a bit, and they are utterly crippling me. So I have lost several days over the last week, and over the last 2 weeks, I haven't been working effectively at all, but pretty much the last couple of months were absolutely terrible. So because my finances are being assaulted, because I can't actually do my work, I have to combine this entire thing with an income source, and I desperately need your support. So I'm going to start migrating my videos across to Patreon and make them pay only, but the pay level will be very, very low. I would say $5 per month. That's about like, if once per month we met up for coffee and you paid a coffee for yourself and me, that would be about $5, I think, So if you really value my work, if you really want to contribute to me staying alive and continuing the fight, then please subscribe to my Patreon. It's called Stop 007. I can bring it up and show you in the background, but I really need to migrate across. And, $5 per month of support is, I really hope, not too much to ask. So let me just show you my my site. Just a second. So here it is. Let me share my screen so that you can find me, because from very soon this is where my videos will be posted, and I will only post adverts on YouTube, but the actual content will be only available through Patreon. So this is what my site looks like. The address is patreon.com/stop007. And you can find me here. You can see that there is already 18 people who have been, supporting me. But ideally, I would like to get up to 500 patrons. And when I look at the number of views that my videos get, if each one of you at least donated $1, I could make a living and actually, continue the fight and expand it and actually offer many more victim services for free. But for that, I really need the community to chip in. Okay, so if you have followed my work for the last 2 years, I went public in December 2016. My YouTube channel opened in November 2016. If you've been supporting me throughout this time, please know now I need your support. I've got a massive court case coming up. My physical health is failing because I've been gunned in the head pretty much for 3 years solid by MI6 and the Swiss intelligence agency and the German intelligence agency. And for the last 3 years, my body couldn't actually get any physical recovery because there hasn't been a single night where my body wasn't gunned with directed energy weapons placed at neighbors, and these days more and more directed energy weapons that are satellite based. So I I didn't even know this is possible to survive this long, and I have no idea how long I will survive, but I can tell you that my medical bills are mounting and my entire expenses are mounting, and this isn't exactly the idea. They're trying to get those people who have the qualifications, who have the energy and the personality structure to go up against the crime cartel and protect other Holocaust victims. They want to totally destroy them financially. So if you really believe that we have to, we should be able to shut this down, if you really believe in the court cases, please support me, and please understand that, I also need to somehow live and, pay the bills and eat. So if you think $5 per month is something that you think my work is worth it, please migrate across to Patreon. But anyway, so today is still, a free episode on YouTube. I would like to put across a couple of very, very important points. And if you are interested in these topics, and if you realize that they're relevant to you and your family and your life, then please, migrate across. I also would like to say that YouTube is still the top platform. So I will continue to post interviews here as well. So please, if I can ask you, subscribe down there. And please also click the little bell next to the subscribe button, which means that you will get notifications. And also, if you have subscribed, check that you are still subscribed. And if not, subscribe again, because YouTube does the same thing as Twitter. Twitter unfollows people for you, and YouTube unsubscribes channels you have subscribed to. So both of them appear to be working closely together with the global crime cartel, which in the US is called the CIA. Right? And this is what is happening. So please, please subscribe, press the bell, and remind other people to do that with other channels that, you guys like. So that's the start. Now let's launch straight into this. Today, I would like to talk about the black budgets. And, okay, let's see. Okay, so somebody says there's a high-pitched buzz. Let me just check the audio. To talk about the black budget. I can't hear any high-pitched buzzing. Maybe it's your computer. All right, so here we are. Let's start. So what I would like to talk about is a couple of news bites and then a lot of financial things that are relevant for our survival. So let me share my screen, but let's start with the news bites. So you remember I did an interview on Thursday with Kevin Annett, and he informed us about the arrest and conviction of Cardinal George Pell. And in the interview with Kevin Annett, about the Vatican, there's a lot more detail, and that's when, I also, afterwards I came on and I put out another video called Food for Thought, where I also talked about the fact that we have to be careful when we're looking at these cases, because we have to, for example, here you can see the Masonic tiling on the Australian police cap. So in other words, you have a Jesuit being arrested by Masons. The Masons are, the Masonic police force is actually a front for Vatican intel, which is otherwise known as the Jesuits. So you have a Jesuit being arrested by Masons. Okay, what does that tell you? That, well, not a fat lot's going to happen, right? And I do want this to happen. I do want this guy to spend the rest of his life in jail, and I want to work towards it. But we have to be aware that even the police officers themselves do not have the power to bring this about, okay? Because their income, in a sense, is dependent. It's coming directly from the crime cartel. I wish it weren't thus, but this is how it seems to be. And sure enough, yesterday I realized that there's already indication that I think I might be right, because here, this is, I call it, MI7, otherwise known as the Guardian. So MI7 is, for those people who don't understand the internal joke, MI7 Wiki. MI7 was the military intelligence section during the First and Second World War, which was in charge of propaganda and censorship. Okay, it was part of the War Office. Now, the War Office has been renamed Department of Defense. Really, it's Department of Criminal Attack and Criminal Asset Stripping, but that aside. So MI7 was the brainwash unit, propaganda and censorship. MI5 is domestic intel, MI6 is foreign, and MI7 is propaganda brainwash. So if you like, for me personally, the BBC is MI7. I don't believe for a second that such a powerful institution in charge of propaganda and censorship would have ever been dissolved. It was most likely renamed, and I think it was renamed the British Bullshit Corporation, or the British Broadcasting Corporation, and otherwise known as the BBC. But for me, they are MI7. And another MI7 outfit, in my view, is the Guardian. Okay, I mean, the Guardian. Who the fuck are you guarding, guys? The Guardian of whom? I think it's the Guardian of the City of London. I think it's the Guardian of the Vatican Crime Cartel. You guys know about my issue with Luke Harding, who refuses to talk about the targeting, even though I talked to him personally, right? He refuses to report about the mass murder and mass torture of British citizens. Now, this is something pretty big for British newspaper, and the Private Eye is equally guilty. They refuse to talk about the mutilation and the murder by MI5 and MI6 of the British people and of European nationals on the British soil. So for me, they are all members of this criminal network. They're part of the criminal syndicate. But the Guardian seems to be particularly bad, okay? And there was other things that the Guardian did trying to implicate Julian Assange, and you can watch the vigils for Julian Assange to know about that a bit more. And again, Luke Harding seems to be involved. So I think Luke Harding is an MI7 agent, okay? MI7, I think the guy is far too hapless to be MI5 and MI6, even though those people are also not the sharpest tools in the box. But anyway, so look at what MI7 is putting out here, right? It says George Pell, this is this Cardinal, okay, the Cardinal, the Vatican treasurer, right? Vatican treasurer, so Vatican Bank, right? Head of the big money laundering racketeering enterprise around the world. So George Pell has a good chance of winning the appeal against convictions, expert says. A law professor says overturning the verdict on the basis of unreasonableness is the defense's best shot. Unreasonableness, when this guy is basically accused to be a kiddie fucker, okay? Now, if you know nothing about the crime cartel and the Vatican, you might think, oh, but maybe he is falsely accused. But actually, the more you study it, you realize that actually, as Kevin Annett said, the child rape and child murder in the Vatican and the Catholic Church is sanctioned by a papal edict or papal bull or whatever the hell you want to call it, right? There's an actual principle in law, right? In canon law that says that it's okay to rape children and to sacrifice them, as in to murder them, right? Now, if you have an organization, an international organization that does stuff like that, as Kevin Annett said, it's a transnational criminal organization. And the Vatican has already been recognized as a transnational criminal organization. So in other words, we have a mafiosi from the transnational criminal organization being finally convicted at last. And here is, MI7 chirping that some law professor somewhere says, oh, but, this verdict can be overturned by unreasonableness. Okay, so you can read through this, right? And say, okay, so here, Cardinal George Pell's appeal against his convictions of sexually assaulting and penetrating choir boys is likely to be granted and has a good chance of succeeding on the basis of unreasonableness, according to legal experts and defense lawyers, right? And in here, experts spoken to by Guardian Australia agreed that while the latter two appeared flimsy, an appeal on the basis of unreasonableness may have a high chance of success. So this argument says the jury delivered a verdict that was not supported by the evidence. Now, one of the things that gets me, okay, is that according to Kevin Annett, the Vatican stages child murder, right, every year on the 23rd and 24th, at least, right? There's other victim testimonies I've heard that says that the Vatican, they have been flown to Rome and have taken part in child murder sessions right under, in the crypt under St. Peter's Basilica, right? So can't we just arrest the fuckers on the child murder, right? Because there had to be a lot of dead bodies being clocked up by the leadership because they have to keep refreshing their control files, right? So where are all the child murders? Can we now make a total list of all the witnesses, the eyewitnesses? Can they please write an affidavit? Could we now finally start publishing them so that if anything happens to the witnesses, we can continue the prosecution so that killing witnesses has actually less and less of a benefit, right? Because the witnesses need to be protected. So anyway, I find this absolutely frustrating, but not surprising, right? And then it says, thank you, Royal Commission. Well, yeah. I mean, you know, you guys know what these royal commissions all are, right? But anyway, so here it is. And this was published on the 28th, you know, on Thursday here. So as we were talking on with Kevin Annett, that this was already being published about this guy possibly winning his appeal. Now, if he won his appeal, I think that would be extremely shocking, right? It would be highly criminal. And then we need to look into who the judges are, and you know, maybe the jury. Are there any planted members? Because the intelligence agencies love to infiltrate everything. So I would guess that the jury would be made up of gang stalkers and plants and stuff like that. So we really need to overhaul the entire system and have a much closer eye who these people are who sit on juries and so on. Okay, and who are the people who are making these decisions? And we need a full, you know, here in these articles, stuff is being said, but I don't see any links to paperwork, any links, you know, really, if it's a 21st century court case, the public should have access to everything. It's not just good enough to sit in the back and not be able to hear what's being mumbled, right, in front of you. You should be able to watch every court hearing through a live stream online, and at the same time have a page where all the documents are published, maybe in a redacted form if anything is sensitive, but it has to be, you know, published so that we can all check up on the judges. I think this is the 21st century court cases, because otherwise none of us really know what the hell's going on, right? And meanwhile, in all this melee, you have these, you know, the Masonic tiling everywhere, and I just think, okay, you know, forget it. Okay, so this is something we need to keep an eye on. And then on another good news is this is now the city council in the US. And this was, I forget where the city council is. I have to look at, Portland, forgive me, Portland City Council. Okay. Now, towards the end of this this video, it's called the City Council 12th of February 2019 work session. And at the very end, you can hear some victims talk about their civil rights being violated by these, you know, so-called police, which are a Masonic thug enforcement network. And this is now the first, after the Bioethics Commission, more and more of these reports are now being published, and you have to keep an eye on it. What really amazes me is that the victims who are speaking up, they are so measured and they're so calm. And I really, one of the things that I'm seeing is that you guys have really absorbed, you know, by the spoonfuls, the mainstream media brainwash, right? And I remind you that that is a psychopathic environment. Mainstream media is a psychopathic environment where the presenters were typically raped or trafficked, but it's not really talked about that much, just like in Hollywood, right? And also all these media heads are typically involved in pedophilia and satanic sacrifice because they are, you know, extensions of MI7 and international equivalents, right? These people are criminals. And a lot of them are psychopaths, and a lot of them are serial killers, right? This is now what's coming to the fore, because it's not just MI5 and MI6, it's MI5, MI6, MI7, and, you know, MI1 to MI22, or how many there were, right? All of these are massive sprawling organizations that are fairly old, fairly big, and therefore, by the laws of system physics, have psychopaths and criminals at the very top. These people are part of a criminal syndicate, and a lot of them are actually psychopaths, and many of them are serial killers, right? Welcome to the 21st century, all right? These are the realizations, how our society was actually being run. Now, when you have a toxic psychopathic environment like that, with psychopaths, criminals, and serial killers at the top, right? And for example, Jimmy Savile, big media personality, was a freaking pedophile and, you know, most likely a serial killer, and also a necrophiliac, right? As in, he liked to shag corpses, okay? Point made, right? I kept telling you guys that necrophilia and pedophilia were the control files, and there's a prime example from the you know, British media landscape. And I tell you, he's not alone. He wasn't alone. There's an entire network of these people. So when you have the media at the very top being psychopaths, right? One thing about psychopaths, and this is what's very well documented and kind of like, you know, shown in the movies, I think, is the fact that their face doesn't really show emotion. And that's because they don't have emotions, right? Apart from the ones that concern them themselves. They get angry if anything, you know, happens to them or anything doesn't go their way, but they don't really get angry for other people because their brain structure doesn't have this projection, right? Or any sort of emotional involvement with the situation of other people. So you get, and this is typical for psychopaths. So psychopath is somebody who can just murder a child and not really show in his face anything apart from maybe, you know, jeering and enjoyment. But they can also do it like total deadpan and eat a ham sandwich, you know, while they're doing it. That's not really a problem because they have got bits missing in their head, okay? Now, when you have the media landscape like that, people didn't notice, but the presenters who were not psychopathic and maybe were even trafficking victims with dissociation themselves, they would start mimicking that for survival and just to fit into the organization. And this is how it came about that our very natural, very human society produced a news channel where you have a woman read out the news like totally deadpan like this and say things like, well, in Syria, 5 million people were murdered last night. You know, that's not fucking normal, right? Do you guys understand that? And this is why I'm so emotional and swear so much about my channel, because you guys need to wake the fuck up, okay? Everything that you've seen so far was not just fake. It was an expression of mental illness. It is absolutely not normal for a human being to hear about the mass murder of other people like them and just be like this. And then on to the weather or on to the football, right? This is not normal. It is not normal by any measure, right? There are some professions who have to adopt a certain kind of distancing and dissociation, typically judges, because they have to appear impartial. So you can't really have a judge listening to anybody testifying and going like, what the fuck? Did you really do that? Did you actually do that? Did you actually do that to him? That would be kind of like, you know, it would be natural, but it's not really what we want from our judges. They have to listen to both sides, right? So they have to be fairly unemotional, right? But we have to remember that this is not normal. And a lot of our humanity was actually weeded out. And actually, through this, psychopaths managed to go past our radar and get into exactly media organizations, politics, the judiciary, the police, and the intelligence agencies, right? And once they're at the top, they start shaping the culture. And before you know it, people are running around trying to imitate their boss. And, you know, because it's all around you, you think it's normal. It's not normal. It is actually mentally ill. It is mentally deranged and degenerate. Okay, so where the hell am I going with all of this, right? What I'm trying to do is get back and actually look out for this, okay? Look out for this and ask yourself if we actually want this in the future. Because ostensibly, right now, this is the accepted standard, that you have the most horrific things done to you. And then you present to city council and you're so calm that, you know, if there weren't any subtitles here and I wouldn't hear her voice, and if I couldn't do lip reading, she might as well be talking about, you know, the most unfortunate incident when a dog fouled in her front yard, right? But sometimes when I'm hearing these testimonies, it's about an actual real life terror campaign that had the aim of driving people to suicide, or is actually gunning people to death in their own home with military weaponry. And that has to be conveyed, okay? It has to be conveyed to other human beings for them to get it. Because if you're just like this, like a news presenter, then your news will go exactly the way as the news about, you know, millions of Iraqi children having been murdered. You know, people will listen to it most calmly. It will not really, you know, make their hands shake, so they won't spill their tea as they're listening to you, right? And then on to the weather or onto the football, right? But this time around, we're dealing with the genocide, guys. So there is no onto the football because there won't be anybody left to play football, right? So now you have to wake up and take it seriously. You have to actually act. And maybe you don't know how to act, but you still have to act. You have to think of something, right? So what I want to say with this is that we need to start, when we are listening to victim testimonies, we need to put the humanity back so that we as humans can actually trigger and respond and sympathize better, that we can be activated better, okay? So to give you an example, if I had spent my entire video YouTube channel talking about genocide in the most calmest fashion, and maybe referring to other genocides as, for example, the Russian genocide and the gulags and all this sort of stuff, and say, well, you know, I mean, this happened throughout the ages, it's nothing really new, and you know, I wouldn't have activated anybody. I would have sent people to sleep. But if we want to recruit helpers to shut down this organized crime cartel, you know, I need to tell you on this Saturday morning to wake the fuck up, right? And start filling out your victim affidavits. Does that have like a more of an activating effect? It should do. It should do. So where I'm going with this now is to say, if you have these sort of council meetings, encourage and make it acceptable for victims to show emotions, right? Because there's something, I think it was Andrea Davidson actually, who taught me, I'm not sure if the word was policing the victims or something else. It was an expression, oh gosh, it was on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, basically where I'm going with this is she pointed out to me the exact term for this. And it is, it's to do with policing the victims as opposed to the perpetrators. Oh, tone policing. That's it. Thank you. It came back to me. She introduced me to the word tone policing. So when you have victims of child abuse and any sort of abuse and violent crime, what MI5, MI6, and the Masonic police services are doing is they start with tone policing. So you can't go into the police station and be human and say, oh my God, I was just robbed, or I was just, I was just raped or something. You're not allowed to be emotional, because then they divert you to the psychiatric help. And we know what psychiatric help is. Psychiatry is a fraudulent science set up by the psychopaths and serial killers who developed MK Ultra to continue their human experimentation program. All right? That is what this whole thing is about, right? So that's what's going to happen. And it starts with tone policing. Whereas in actual real life, if something horrible happens to you, that's the one time in your life being really emotional is justified, right? In actual fact, if you weren't emotional, you would be a freaking psychopath. So if somebody walked into a police station and just really calmly just explain how, they were, I don't know, mugged or robbed, I would just almost, I would almost suspect insurance fraud. It's like, how come you're so calm? You tell me, you were gang raped and now you just wander in and you're like la-di-da, But yet, even though this way around is how it should be, currently, if you go into a police station and you're too emotional, if you go to city council meeting and you're too emotional, you're not taken seriously. And that's the wrong way around. This is exactly the system inversion that the psychopaths have brought about. In actual fact, you should go in, you should be really emotional, because this is how you're going to activate the people in your community, because your energy, your upset, your grief, you know, transfers much easier and is much better understood by other humans around you who are not psychopathic if they can see the emotion. Okay, so please watch out for this. And please, everywhere around the world, stop the tone policing and stop policing the victims, and actually encourage victims to show how much they suffer, respect that, and you know, condition yourself to trigger your protective instinct, because only like this can we protect the victims, which is by now all of us, and start fighting the criminals. Okay, and start being very, very suspicious if you have a highly emotional scene and people do not show emotion. It can mean two things. Number one is that they are victims of trauma-based mind control and they are dissociating, right? Or it means that they're actually full-blown psychopaths, in which case they are seriously dangerous, right? So, you know, start watching out for these and start distinguishing which of the two, okay? And do not confuse people who are dissociating with people who are real life psychopaths and serial killers, okay? They are two different categories. But it is actually traditionally and historically precisely because psychopaths who rose to the top had to continue their lineage, right? They had to keep the power in their family's hands. So if you had an aging psychopath, at some point he had to recruit his son to take over the business, but the son had to be just as psychopathic as him to keep all the other mafiosis at bay, right? So this is how it came about, that especially the children of very powerful people in very, you know, highly criminal organizations were put through trauma at an early age, because already back in the pharaonic times, in Babylonian times, they learned that if something like that happens to children at a very early age, the children appear to be very calm, very level-headed when, you know, other you know, shocking things happen. So for a ruler, that's very good, but it's also kind of like a little psychopath simulation, right? Psychopaths are just born that way. They just have bits missing in their head. So they will not have this problem, right? But when a psychopath has children, right, the children are not necessarily all psychopathic. So the psychopath emulator had to be somehow applied to the children for the protection of the aging psychopath, right, and his wealth and his power. Okay, so this is actually where this whole MK Ultra business and monarch programming comes from. Okay, this is why it's called monarch programming, right? Because they had to program the little monarchs to become little fucked in the head psychopaths who would do exactly the bidding of the previous, you know, psychopath. So this is how they've been just perpetuating their lineage. Now, at this point in time, right, we are going through and we need to learn who is who, right? Who is dangerous, who's just been programmed. They need to be deprogrammed. They need to wake up, and we need to cycle the entire system back to sanity, because this way we're not going to survive, right? So this is how we're going to do it, right? Number one is the biggest distinguisher between psychopaths and non-psychopaths is the normal's ability to empathize, right? And to activate upon seeing the suffering of another person. You activate into action. And this is what holds us together. This is the glue in our society, right? So we need to start encouraging also people being just openly emotional, because everybody who's listening will understand it on a much more instinctive and fundamental level. If you see somebody break down crying in a meeting, it will leave a lasting effect in your head. You will remember this scene, right? You will understand that something very important was said. But if it's just blah, 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 right? You will forget. It will sound like the news to you. And by the way, this is exactly why the news sounds that way, Because even though they kind of have to report about the mass murder of the Iraqis and the Syrians, they want you to just not get very upset and not activate. By all means, you know, just don't activate. Stay like that. Okay, right, we're through the news. You've lasted this long. On to the football, right? And typically when you look at the volume, you will notice that mass murder is being reported like very, very calmly and very quietly. You know, occasionally they want to grip you with the, you know, kind of like really discharge all your emotional energy into the war pictures and, you know, the action. But when it comes to the suffering, they don't really want you break down crying at home in front of your TV set, because then you activate. So you just have to be told, okay, there's action happening. Other people are taking action. You know, the US Army or whatever army of the Crown Corporation is doing something, right? So you stay at home and, you know, be quiet. But otherwise, all this reporting happens at this kind of level. But when it's onto the sport or the weather, right, both of which are totally irrelevant, right? Then it's like, yay, and then it's going to be sunny tomorrow, and yeah, and this football team, yeah, they've done really well. So the, you know, that's when the excitement goes up. So if you are listening and kind of listening into your own emotional state, right, it will be calm, 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 and then on to the football, you know, sunny weekend ahead, right? And this is how the brainwash has been working all this time. Who's been doing the brainwash? Well, in the UK, MI7, right? So, and just as a kind of little hint, if you, you know, if you don't believe me about this whole MI7 business, you can, as always, listen to the Crime Cartel themselves, right? And maybe I can even bring it up for you. Yes, I think it's here, right? So what I'm going to show you is the Crime Cartel, the Crown Corporation's British arm, you know, the British intelligence conglomerate, are also involved in making Hollywood movies, right? And recently there has been the whistle blown about how many in the US, what a strong say the Pentagon has in Hollywood. So they can change scripts, they can put stuff in, they can take stuff out, they can commission, and they are commissioning movies and so on and so on. So the Pentagon kind of runs Hollywood. They have the ultimate say. Now in Britain, that is, you know, would be run by MI6 and 5 and 7, MI7, right? And every time they do that, they kind of put in their little, you know, internal jokes just for laughs, right? Where they say the truth, knowing full well that everybody else is far too uninformed to ever cotton on to what they're saying, okay? So this is actually highlighted. Now I'm going to show you, and I hope, okay, let me share my screen and show you where you can find the evidence. So if you, sorry, it's actually written with a double N. So if you search for Johnny English, right, and look for the newest trailer, now I can't show you the newest trailer, but, you know, here, the whole thing starts with the pyramid again, right? I mean, London has several pyramids. Here's the Shard, right? There's the other here in Canary Wharf. This is Canary Wharf #1 with the pyramid on top. So here's the obelisk, a big, massive, you know, the stone cock of the Crime Cartel with the, you know, triangle at the top. So here, this is the newest incarnation. So when the trailer for Johnny English starts, it tells you that this entire thing is about the Crime Cartel, okay? Because here, the first second of any music video, any advert, or any film, or the first couple of seconds explain what it's about. And the very first scene shows you the pyramid, the older one, the newest one, and the Thames, this wiggling represents the snake. Okay, the snake of the Vatican. It just so happens that this wiggly bit is going right through the city of London. Okay, so there's Canary Wharf, the newest tax haven, you know, thing. And here, London Bridge, sorry, it's Tower Bridge is you know, with the tower, next to the tower is the outer edge, the easternmost edge of the city of London, right? So the city of London is over here, right? So anyways, you've got the obelisk, you know, the big new pyramid here, the double pillars on Tower Bridge, and the snake. You have it all, right? So this is a cartel movie. Now, as you're watching the Cartel movie, and this is let's see how much I can show. Oh, by the way, this is the London Eye, the all-seeing eye. And when you look at the map, what the London Eye looks at across the Thames, it's actually 10 Downing Street and the HQ of the Metropolitan Police. So this Ferris wheel is the London Eye. So in other words, as you're going through the image sequence, you have seen the obelisk, the pyramid, the snake, and the all-seeing eye, right? The London Eye is the all-seeing eye, right? Okay, so this is a cartel movie, the world's greatest spy. Okay, so this is like, you know, spying advertising, right? Tongue-in-cheek advertising. And the next scene here, this is the so-called Ceausescu Towers. This is the MI6 building in London, right? It's called Ceausescu Towers because the Romanian dictator run by MI6 and the CIA, called Nicolae Ceausescu, is famous for having built himself a massive sprawling palace. I mean, the guy was a total idiot, surrounded by mentally ill people. So yeah, but the people who work at MI6, they just you know, comment on the Byzantine, just out of bounds ludicrousness of this building, which is why it's called the Ceausescu Towers. Okay, so anyway, you have it all right in this sequence. You saw the obelisk, the snake, the all-seeing eye, you know, the pyramid, and the MI6 building. So, you know, and then you have this red thread going around it with the red bus, you know, so lit up kind of orangey red. Okay, so it's marked in red. It's about, you know, MI6 and this whole international spying. Fair enough. But now when Johnny English gets a letter, okay, I hope I can fast forward to the letter. Maybe it's here. Maybe I can show you a, oh, sorry, this is, yes, this is the letter. So Johnny English, who was then teaching at the school because he was kicked out, receives a letter, right? And then if you look carefully, the letter is stamped MI7. MI7. Why not MI6? Because James Bond typically works for MI6. Right? Now, what's the internal joke about this? Well, the internal joke is that this is a movie put out by MI7. So Johnny English is their agent. Do you understand? He's a propaganda tool. He's a propaganda agent, which is why Johnny English is now being recruited back into MI7. Do you understand the internal joke? So in other words, MI7 is alive and well. They say it themselves. They make jokes about it, right? And they still, since the Second World War, are controlling your brainwash, okay? So I hope you guys can still hear me. I'm trying to throw it an eye on the chat, and every single time I'm getting a bit too close to MI5 and MI6. Either my audio changes to sounding like chipmunks, or you know, they freeze something and stuff like that. So anyway, I hope you got this message. Okay, so this is super important to keep in mind, right? So we have, in my view, the Guardian is MI7, the BBC is MI7. Johnny English, you know, they even joke about the fact that he's an MI7 agent, not an MI6 agent, right? Because he's a tool of propaganda and so on. And then I really encourage you to watch the Johnny English movies. And I will talk a lot more about that in one of the upcoming Global Crime Fighters. But what is very important to understand here, okay, and this ties, I'm getting onto the finance soon, so just bear with me. What is really important to understand is that as Dr. Ronnie Kilder, the murdered former chief medical officer of Finland, says, everything is upside down. So what you think is a documentary put out by the BBC is actually a propaganda piece by MI7. But what is put out as a parody and as a joke, for example, Johnny English and Austin Powers, is actually a documentary. It's the other way around, you see. And the reason why it's the other way around, and why, for example, music videos, stuff that, you know, you were traditionally thought to think, oh, this is just what, you know, teenagers are watching. I mean, this is, you know, if you want to have serious stuff, you watch the History Channel or a good BBC documentary. But no, it's the other way around. The reason why it's the other way around is because the Crime Cartel Traditionally, it's a mafia, okay? So their employees are thugs, hitmen, serial killers, and prostitutes. Okay, so you are running a corporation with thugs and hookers, and you have to somehow make a corporation-y mission statement, right? And the CEO has to broadcast stuff, but these people are not going to listen, right? I mean, they're not really the listen-y, read memo type of people, are they? So you have to communicate with them in a way that goes into their thick skull without them noticing. You have to keep repeating and repeating and repeating. And if you look at, for especially low-income households, what's always on is TV, the TV set, and typically MTV or some music channel. It's on all the frickin' time. So everything is being broadcast through music videos, right? This is why music videos have all this cartel signaling. This is why music videos actually express the business plans of the cartel to get the global network of Masons and the global network of criminals onto the, you know, the mission statements and know what the CEO is putting out and so on, right? And comedies are also very easy to watch. So any sort of subtle advertising of the newest gizmos and, you know, stuff like that would appear in Austin Powers and Johnny English, right? Okay, if they want to make it really cool, you know, to recruit the kiddies, it would also be in James Bond and stuff like that, right? But James Bond is not fiction. It's a documentary, and an even better documentary, because fewer normals take it seriously, is actually Austin Powers. And I will get on to what I mean exactly, because Austin Powers, when I analyzed one of the films, it had about 10 or 11 really cutting to the core. This is, you know, in your face what the crime cartel has been doing and is doing right now, hidden away in the film, right? So I learned more from Austin Powers than I, you know, would have learned from watching CNN or the BBC for the last 15 years, you know? So remember this, it's an inversion. And the reason why the inversion comes about is because the Crown Corporation, the crime corporations, employees are the lowest of the low. They are thick people and thuggish people, and they will not read memos, okay? So the dumbest shit is actually the most important stuff. And the really highbrow stuff would only ever be read or watched by people who are really hardworking, are middle class, and can be asset stripped, right? They are the prime prey for the Crown Corporation, for the crime cartel. So CNN and BBC and the hard-to-read daily news are the last place on planet Earth where you will find anything relevant to your survival if you're middle class. Do you understand this? And, you know, this is how it came about that I cottoned on to this very early on, and I started systematically studying the music videos. And there was this hilarious scene of, you know, my husband coming home and saying, oh, so, you know, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm studying white collar crime and current affairs. And he was like, really? To me, it looks like you're just watching the same Britney Spears video 15 times over. I just thought, geez, yeah, where shall I start? You know, I mean, yeah, but this is what it comes down to, okay? If you want to really study organized crime and current affairs as they're really, you know, currently happening, do not watch the news. That is the last place on planet Earth where you will find any news. In fact, these days, I use it as an inversion. Anything that is really being discussed at great length in the mainstream media, that is exactly the last thing that is of any relevance what the hellsoever. Okay, now this brings me on to finance, Brexit, and the black budget. Okay, so I hope you understand where I'm coming from. But I would like to, oh, sorry, I have a few more things to say before I get on to, okay, so for your education, I've got these things up. So before I forget, let me share my screen and point you to some things before I get onto finance. So, talking about the intelligence world, I would like to draw your attention to a new interview by Bill Binney that's out here. okay, published 27th of February, just a few days ago. It's called Ex-NSA Bill Binney versus Deep State Anarchist. This is David Gornowski's A Neighbor's Choice, episode 24. Please watch and please hit the like button here. And then the other thing is there's another interview with Jason Goodman here called Can Timing and Technology Shatter the Russian Hack Fake News, with special guest Bill Binney. So that's also important to listen to. And one thing that really raised an eyebrow is this here, Bill Binney warning Trump secret military plan to dismantle the deep state in March 2019. Now, I haven't actually listened to this. I kind of like skipped through, and I'd never actually got on to the real, you know, bit of it. So please help me read this. It was mostly about the Q drops and so on and so on. Stuff that I can never get my head around, frankly. But anyway, just talking about this as a headline, yes, the truth is we need to dismantle the deep state, right? But when it's a military plan, okay, so, oops, sorry, this is an advert. I clicked by accident. When it's a military plan, keep in mind that the military is in deep capture, okay? So it has to be a part of the military that is not satanic and not Masonic, okay? If you can find any military personnel who are not Knights of Malta or Knights of Columbus or Knights of the Coconut, right, and not Masons, then okay, good luck to you. But, you know, any other way, you have basically infiltrators on your book. So keep that in mind. Now, the other thing I would like, talking about military plans and dismantling, I would like to say a few words about this whole stuff that's being put out by people I've never heard about, you know, and in the alternative news. I find it always very strange when like fringe accounts suddenly start broadcasting like the biggest news. And I think, well, if this is real news, you must have gotten it straight from the CIA, right? Because you don't have a track record and, you know, bringing this stuff to the fore. But okay. I really warn you guys in the US about this whole thing about military tribunals in Guantanamo. You have to keep in mind that Guantanamo is, again, an extraterritorial territory, okay? So any court trials and any executions supposedly happening in Guantanamo, you will not be able to travel there and actually sit there as a public observer in the court case. You cannot check that any transcripts released are actually from a real court hearing because you were not there. Right? And most importantly, any executions of supposed cartel members, you can't actually check if they were real. And even if there's, you know, video footage, you can't check if that's not CGI, right? So anything that's happening in Guantanamo, you might as well forget about it because it's a controlled military zone set up by the cartel. It's a controlled cartel stage where normal American people have no control, no right to be there, no right to visit and actually, you know, go to a court hearing. I really warn you of this because to me, it seems like a big Masonic fraud, like Nuremberg was, okay? Right? And I showed those people who followed my channel, I showed you how, you know, Goering, for example, is supposed to have, you know, killed himself in prison, is there showing the sign of the hidden hand and the all-seeing eye as he's lying there supposedly as a corpse. But really, he's just lying there as a happy Nazi about to be ferreted out to his, you know, retirement home. So be very careful, right? These military tribunals have already been a fraud before. In my view, the only type of military tribunals that are actually worth anything are those which are fully filmed. All the transcripts are in full, immediately uploaded. The video footage from the trial is uploaded and kept, like the Supreme Court in the UK does it, for example, right? Very, very good standard, very high standard. And the American public has a right to be there and to go into the room and actually be there. So you need to stage all this in really big courthouses, right? And it's not good enough if only a couple of gang stalkers are inside and then the rest is just in overflow rooms where they, again, are just watching a computer screen. The reason why that's not good enough is because we know that there's software that can literally modify a live stream and make objects and people appear and disappear during the live broadcast. This software has already been published. It's a piece of NSA software, right, developed by DARPA or NSA or one of their, you know, contractors. So unless you're in the room and unless you can see and hear people of flesh and blood yourself, and unless you can be absolutely sure and check that there was actually a real court case with real verdicts and there were real executions, you cannot trust anything. Okay, so in my books, anything that happens in Guantanamo is just a big fucking show. It's a big fucking show because you can't check if that's true. You have no idea. You haven't got a clue who's there and who does it, right? So unless it's on American soil, and by the way, Washington, D.C. is not American soil. It's an extraterritorial area. Okay, just like the City of London. Anything happening inside the City of London is on Vatican territory and is not in the UK. So unless it's on actual proper American soil outside of Washington, D.C., in a big kick-ass auditorium, ideally a football stadium where you can fit in tens of thousands of Americans who just came to watch, unless it's like that, it's not worth very much. Okay? Please keep that in mind. So now on to the important stuff, right? But what I want to say is, yes, we need to clean up the deep state in March. We need to have arrests. The machine gunning into my body is getting ludicrous. This is done by the Swiss military, which is also in deep capture, and I guess the satellite weapons run by the US Space Command. And they haven't stopped gunning my head since January 2016, right? I get daily and nightly gunning. And I want that to stop. This is a war crime. Gunning of civilian accommodation is a war crime in any war. But doing that persistently in a shift service over 3 years is outside anything we have seen, even in Nazi Germany. Okay, when you went back to the barracks in a concentration camp, at least there you were left the fuck alone. Well, I'm not left the fuck alone. I'm being raped. My head chips are being worked. My hands are being opened and closed by remote control. My arms are being, moved by remote control. I get electromagnetic pulses shot into my shoulders, making my arms jolt. Shots into the spine, making my entire body jolt. Non-stop gunning to the head. Okay, so now it's time for the military, those who are still sane, to arrest the other part of the military. Yes, it's true we need the military for this because these are military installations and military weapons doing it to us, right? So I'm sorry, sticking crystals around the edges of your bed and doing mindfulness and meditation won't fucking cut it, okay? We need the military to finally protect the civilian population. We need this, but we also need proper, open, transparent, and public court cases to back this up. Okay, so please, yes, and March is very important. Now, to the victims, because it's so important, you need to start writing your affidavits. I need a lot more affidavits, especially from the UK, because I'm going to file my court case in the UK because I have been trafficked by MI6, you know? So please, 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 support me. I need many, many, many more affidavits. Please fill it out. This is for a real court case. I want a civilized court case and I need backup, okay? So now's your time and use this weekend to get going with the affidavit. Okay, so now, another piece of news, okay, if you want to find out, because now that I'm talking about the court cases, okay, you can familiarize yourself with the UK courts very, very well if you go to the YouTube channel of the UK Supreme Court. This is where all their judgments are being read out. And the newest news from yesterday is that the Supreme Court will sit in Cardiff in 2019. Now, the story behind this is the following. The Supreme Court is there for pretty much the entire Commonwealth, but especially the United Kingdom. And because they are there for you know, Scotland and Wales and so on, they have a Scottish judge because Scottish law still has some, you know, subtle differences and so on. But the Supreme Court sometimes tours the country, and they not just sit in the Supreme Court building, they also go around the country, okay? Now, I hope that they will continue filming it. But this is, for example, Lady Hale here, and one of the previously the only female judge. Now there are 2 female Supreme Court judges, right? So Lord Lloyd Jones, I don't even know yet because he's new. So you can listen to them announce this, and you can already familiarize yourself with the personalities and so on. And because I mean, I really wish that the Court of the Appeal and the High Courts were also televised. I think that would be the way forward into the 21st century, just like the Supreme Court is, okay? Because then we could really get to know these judges. They are very, very important, but at the moment it isn't. So you can't really get to know the High Court judges, but you can already get to know the Supreme Court judges. And if you go to the Supreme Court, supremecourt.uk, you can click here and watch the live Supreme Court sittings, okay? You can see them on the March 2019, there will be a new live broadcast, okay? You can find out who is sitting on there. But for past cases, okay, so decided cases, you can go through all the cases here, click on one. You can see the judgment, the press summary, right? Then the uploaded judgment, the judgment summary. This would be broadcast on YouTube, so I can't play it because then I'm kind of violating the copyright. So you press play and you can watch this. This is the summary being read out, but you can also watch a hearing. Now, I'm not gonna play this, okay? I'm just gonna skip to a still image. So you can see the barristers, and you can also see the judges, and you can hear their questions. Now, I probably can't. So here there was just a question because I can see the barrister, you know, look at the judges. But, you know, you can just see the entire courtroom. And as you're watching this, you can, let's see if I can show you. You can hear the questions by the judges, and you can bit by bit get to know their personalities, okay? So here's the room. You can also sometimes see the audience and so on, but you can see these barristers. So this is public information, okay? So you can have a look, and this is really what it should be like. I think the video footage is left up for at least a year, you know. So here, video on demand footage is also available to watch for cases that have been heard or decided within the last year, right? So you can have a look. But frankly, I think the video footage should be left up forever because these are, you know, living documents, and you know, they are very, very important for the future. But the point is that you should take it very, very seriously. You should start to get to know your Supreme Court judges because they're so important. You should also start to read these judgments. And I warn you, they are very hard to read sometimes, but then you have to ask yourself, why is it so hard to read? And how can it be made better and simpler, okay? Because right now, just like the financial system, the legal system is extremely hard to understand for most people. Now, this is not a safe system. If the vast majority of the population in Britain cannot understand and follow the judiciary, it means that you have these people kind of apart, above everybody else, unaccountable, because no one, barely anybody, can actually understand what the hell they're saying. Now, when they are determining everything about your life, okay, there's also Parliament, but let's face it, you know, the legal architecture is really what matters at the end of the day. If these people determine your life and your finances, and you can't eat, they speak gobbledygook, that's a real problem. And with real problem, I mean, it opens itself up to boundless criminality. Okay. Now, an example of boundless criminality is, for example, the bank charges. Now, the bank charges case in the UK, this means something to everybody in the UK, I hope. For those people from other parts of the world, the bank charges legal case was the following. Bank charges in the UK have had this habit and still have this habit of, if you go overdrawn by £2, you were whacked with, you know, overdraft charges of £30. And it's like, hang on, I went overdrawn with £2. This happened to me as I was a new undergraduate because I didn't understand that frickin' Victorian checks take days to clear, you know. So there was a check that I'd forgotten that hadn't cleared because I'd, you know, given it to somebody like weeks before. And then it cleared, and then pulled my entire bank account down. So suddenly I was literally overdrawn by £2 and I was charged £30 for this. And I'm like, come on. I mean, you know, the effective interest I'm paying for this is ludicrous, right? But they just whacked you with a flat fee, and this is how they made a lot of money. Now, with very poor people, they kept whacking them with these £30 charges, and £30 was 50% more than my monthly internet bill, you know? So it was like whacking poor people with an extra telecommunication subscription, you know, every single time went overdrawn. So this, which was frankly outright criminality and criminal penalizing of people, was then dealt with in the courts, and I personally think dealt with in a highly fraudulent manner. So as it migrated through the High Court and the Court of Appeal all the way to the Supreme Court, the arguments were kind of falsified, you know. And the original argument, for example, was that according to English law, a private corporation is not allowed to penalize people. Only the state can penalize, okay? So you're not allowed to levy a penalty and just like punish people if you're not the state. But this argument, which frankly in my books is the only argument that's actually worth anything, and is the argument that counts, was kicked out very, very early on in the High Court stage. So by the Court of Appeal stage, there was no, you know, it was already dealt with by the Masonic network. And then it became ever more academic with what they were dealing with. And this is exactly how the judiciary part of the Masonic crime cartel works. They take the real issues and they divert the entire case away from the real issues onto very academic stuff that only very few people can understand. In real terms, what has actually been happening is that the global organized crime cartel known as the banking system, which actually consists only of one bank, the Vatican one bank, has been asset stripping the British people. It has been criminally and fraudulently asset stripping the British. It has been racketeering, right? And it has been threatening them, and it has been destroying their livelihoods, and it has pushed a lot of people, pensioners and children into poverty, and it was lethal for some people. That's the real thing. Now, when you listen to the Supreme Court judgment in the bank charges case, there is no freaking trace of that. Okay, now that is exactly the Masonic fraud. How the hell did we get from targeted asset stripping by a transnational criminal organization onto these academic points? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly the art of the barristers and also of some bought off, you know, judges. So this is how it works. Now, the antidote is that you need to start doing your homework. You need to start doing what you hate to do, which is read these judgments and start thinking. And when you don't understand something, you need to start writing complaints to the Supreme Court. If the entire Supreme Court got weekly letters, a pile this high with just complaints, right? I mean, first of all, I think they would divert them to trash. But still, it would make an impression. I think at this moment, they're not getting any post, really. I think they got post from me once to do with systems analysis, but that's it, right? But they need to get a lot more post, right? And I really think that those Supreme Court judges who are genuinely trying, they would actually appreciate this. So they need support, they need backup, and they need feedback, in my view. but the feedback has to be, you know, qualified. Now, what is giving you kind of a support? Actually, maybe I've got this book here. Yes, I do. Now, what is playing in our favor is Lord Bingham, who published the book, The Rule of Law, right? That actually is in our favor. First of all, because it's very thin and very easy to read, right? It's very easy to read with some chapters that are literally just this big. I do like that, you know. But this is kind of like a little Bible that I think you should all read. So it's called The Rule of Law. Now, this is what we don't have right now. Okay, it's kind of funny that there's a crown being painted, you know, by the publishers, because actually we don't, I mean, she first of all is, I think she is Isis, the goddess Isis, right? Going back to pharaonic times, but that aside, here at least she isn't blind, which is already, you know, blind as a bat, which is a step up, but she seems to have a crown, which typically is the logo of the Crown Corporation. Now, this is actually very honest. This is how it is right now. We have a judiciary that's headed by the Crown Corporation. The crown is not the royal household, it is the Vatican Crown Corporation in the UK, headquartered in the City of London. This is what we have now. Now, Lord Bingham has already outlined some things that are wrong and some core principles we absolutely have to uphold to go back to sanity. Now, this is what I call a good start. To be able to implement this, all of us need to be able to read the English, which in case of this book is really easy, right? So if you're in London, you probably have a fuck-long commute to work, perhaps even on the London Tube. I think you should get this book and start reading it on your way to work and home, okay? Just read it. It's, you know, not that long. You can really flick through it, okay? And most importantly, you can go into the index, and this is where the key principles are. Now, all of this ties in with finance, guys, which is why I'm bringing this up, because finance and the judiciary have interfaced in the bank charges case, and the judiciary has utterly and totally failed. Okay. Now, we need to study how exactly the judiciary failed, why, and what we can do about it. And this is step number one. So Lord Bingham, right, is working in your favor here. Another lord who's working in your favor is called Lord Wolfe. Now, Lord Wolfe has been trying to make the judiciary adopt understandable, plain English. Okay? So even the judges get pissed off having to read the, you know, inscrutable mumblings of other judges. And at some point they woke up and they thought, can't we just all cut the crap? You know? And there's a lot more of that needs to be done, frankly. Okay? So look up Lord Wolfe and look up Tom Bingham and familiarize yourself. And the reason why you have to understand what these guys were trying to do and why is because if you want to own your judiciary, you need to understand what your judiciary is doing. You need to understand its core principles, and you need to understand its language. Okay, so Lord Wolfe and Lord Bingham, okay, Bingham. The Rule of Law, okay? Now, if you are a victim in the UK, you have to get this book and learn it off by heart, okay? Now, in here are the key principles, which are, for example, so part one of this book is the importance of the rule of law. Well, if you're a victim, you already understand that, right? Then there's some history, but then part two is the accessibility of the law. Exactly. Now, about the accessibility of the law, I already have note from one victim who spoke to his lawyer, and the lawyer said that the lawyers in the UK were told not to take on cases by the Holocaust victims, by the targeting victims. Now, that is the accessibility of the law going down the pan. I tried to apply to the Bar Pro Bono Association, and they turned me down, right? So the law becomes pretty inaccessible if you have to go pro se, especially when you are a mutilation victim, because MI6 and MI5 will continue mutilating you, as they did in my case, as you are preparing your court case. And in my case, they even started muscle pulsing me as I stood up before a judge. That was the second hearing with Judge Edith. Okay, so I'm being kind of raped and prodded and, you know, tortured and mutilated as I am litigating against them. This is unprecedented, okay? So the accessibility of the law has pretty much gone down the pan, right? And MI6 and MI5 helped that along in spades. Now, law, not discretion, is the second thing. So there's many things, for example, in the family courts that are the discretion of the judge, or for example, in divorce law, right? This is not fucking law. You're at the mercy of a Mason. That's what it means. Right? It means that a Mason can make it up as he or she goes along. And in the case of the family courts, it led to the establishment of industrial scale child trafficking enabled by the family courts in Belgium, in Germany, in the UK, in the US, and also here in Switzerland. Right? For these, I already have evidence for, and there are probably many more countries suffering from the same. So law, not discretion, right, is instrumental in stopping human trafficking and child trafficking. Now, equality before the law is the other section you need to read, right? Well, yeah, fuck yeah. Equality before the law, for example, also means that when I'm litigating against MI6, we don't have equality before the law because MI5 and MI6 control the courts, which is how they modified the transcript. This is how they took out a question by Judge Edith and Judge Spencer as well, and my answers, right? So those things are missing, and that is because there was no equality. So MI5 and MI6 control the transcription machines, right? The entire transcription architecture. They can modify the transcripts. They can modify the audio recordings. They can blackmail the judges. They can even kill the judges, as it happened, you know, as it seems very strongly in the case of Charles VII, right? I think it was, well, it was said it was Judge Pomfrey or whatever, who just happened to just, you know, die randomly. What are the chances when you have this big multi-billion dollar or pound court case, you know? So this is not equality before the law, and we cannot have equality before the law in secret courts because, for example, the Investigatory Powers Tribunal, I already proved that it is a captured court. It is not, if I ever went before the IPT, I would not have equality before the law because I can already prove that in my case, the defendants control that court, right? So this is not equality before the law. Now, Section 7 is human rights. Very important. Human rights, as in not to be raped and tortured and mutilated in your own home, as it's happening to me, okay? And to many, many others, of course, as well, right? Dispute resolution, a fair trial, exactly. The rule of law in the international legal order. So you see that every single thing here is relevant. Now, part 3 is very important as well because part 3 contains 2 sections. Number 1, it's terrorism and the rule of law. Now, typically in Britain, terrorism is used to refer to false flags and staged events by MI5 and MI6, right? The 7/7 so-called terrorist attacks have been staged by MI5 and then covered up by MI7, right? Now, there were no terrorist attacks, really, okay? So, and all the other so-called terrorist attacks in Europe and the US turn out to be false flags and staged events, right? So you have to read this and you have to ask yourself if Lord Bingham knows this, right? And if not, these judges have to be informed with hopefully expert affidavits from the people who are investigating false flag attacks, okay? Now, the final thing is the rule of law and the sovereignty of Parliament. Yeah, well, you read it for yourself. So, you know, now, if you're not in the UK, you can ask, what the hell has this got to do with me? If you're part of the Commonwealth, right, which includes Australia and New Zealand, and I think Trinidad and Tobago, and, you know, a third of the planet, then this is still relevant to you. If you're in the United States, this is still relevant to you because I think you can quote the cases. You can certainly make reference to them, right? And your legal system is based on this. So these core principles should be the same, okay? So even though this was written by a UK judge in Britain, it's also relevant in the United States. And in any case, the principles of a judiciary and the principles of justice are universal. Okay, so if you all want to have a common denominator, I would say we should all read this book. Okay, and I've just seen that the price here at the back, I'm not sure if you can read it, is the price is £9.99. So if I turn this book upside down, it's 666. Pure coincidence or not? But anyway, you know, this is the sort of stuff, I mean, with the pricing and this, I think it's done probably independently of Tom Bingham, so I can't blame him. But if you put out a book on the rule of law, you can be sure that you're going to piss off the Crown Corporation and the Satanists, right? So if they can somehow mark your work and say, oh, but it's actually ours, they would do it with subtle things like that, you know, like, you know, the pricing and the cover. But even when they do that, it proves just how much we need the rule of law. So in a sense, you know, that and you know, this is just going to, should just increase the sale for the book, you know. So that is very important. Now on to finance. Okay, on to finance. Let me share my screen. And I'll explain what the relationship is to finance. So first of all, please, you know, listen to this from the Supreme Court judges. And now we are going to get on to Brexit and finance. Okay. Now, the reason why I came online today is because I watched this video here, and this is from a channel called S. Williamism. S. Williamism, and the title is The Real Elephant in the Brexit Living Room. Now, this channel is very, very interesting. It's a new video that has been put out after a long break. But this guy here is actually going around London and is analyzing the symbols, right? And he's pointing to the blue doors and, you know, all these urns and these vases on buildings and so on, right? So he is investigating pretty much the crime cartel, although he doesn't quite put it like that. So I really encourage you to go to his channel and look at his other videos, and just to get, you know, a feel for the kind of sites that he is analyzing and the stuff that he's pointing out. So for example, if you just scroll through past videos, right, he's drawing attention to buildings that have prominent 33s. Okay, so this here, for example, is the new American embassy. Okay, and it has a big prominent 33. I mean, the new American embassy is basically a Masonic lodge, and it's pretty much in your face. Now, Donald Trump visited this, and as you know, Donald Trump, there's a video where Donald Trump confesses to being a Mason. This is bad news, guys, okay? So in other words, with the Masonic presidency of Donald Trump and the new American embassy putting a big whopping 33 in your face, right, they are announcing their strength, their continued presence, okay? Now, this is something you should know about, but already in this video, right, so originally he's talking about Brexit, but then he does he goes down, and at some point he hops down to the city of London, okay, and then he spots something that looks like a golden carriage, okay? But this one is not owned by the Queen. It's actually owned by Wells Fargo and Company. I'm not sure if you can see that. It's up there, Wells Fargo and Company, okay? And this carriage is on display in the City of London, right? In the Wells Fargo business building, which is this big, super new building, which is, again, number 33, right? So what has all this to do with finance? Well, Wells Fargo, right, is a bank. It's now located in the City of London. Where else? And it shows for itself the address that at house number 33, just like the American Embassy. So an American bank and the American embassy have these Masonic numbers because there are 33 official levels of Freemasonry, right? Combined with the Masonic presidency, this is a show of power. Okay, so you've got 33 here for Wells Fargo, 33 there for the new American Embassy, right? And Trump is a Mason. So, you know, what does this mean? It means that the Masonic crime cartel, which is a front of Vatican intel and the Jesuits, continues its hold. So unless we do something about this, right? Unless people start really questioning how the American embassy has the cheek to put a big whopping 33 on their building, like pretty much in your face, and unless we start dissolving the City of London and this which is a tax haven and an extraterritorial foreign country at the heart of London, right, nothing will change. Okay. Now, my question, my personal question, right, about this guy here, I think it's very good of what, what he's doing, but frankly, the video quality and some of the, in the very beginning, he does like a zoom down, from space all the way down into London, I mean, perhaps this is something that can be bought online, but the video quality is so high quality, and it just so happens that this guy looks strikingly like an actor called Daniel Cumberbatch playing Sherlock here, right? If you have watched Sherlock, you will recognize, the similarity. Now, I just find it striking that MI7 puts out the Sherlock series, and then simultaneously, there's a YouTube channel doing a sleuth investigation of the crime cartel with a guy who strikingly looks like Dave, is it David or Daniel? Benedict Cumberbatch. I'm an idiot. Sorry, Benedict Cumberbatch. Of course, don't know what happened there in my head. But, the similarity, and to me, it's kind of, perhaps this is coincidence, but perhaps not, because look at the number of views on his channel, like 197,000, 32,000, right? I mean, for somebody who isn't a YouTube personality, it smacks to me of MI5 help or MI7 help, So this is why I'm really intrigued by this channel. But so I've got this gut feeling it's an MI5 thing, okay? They kind of catch on the wave of all these people, going through the symbolism, and then they want to get in there and do it as well and kind of help you along, hoping that then you will rely on their conclusions. And it is their conclusions that will be, tricking you. So this is why I keep an eye on it. I have to say, I really support his work when he's going through London and showing you the symbolism. I think this is perfect. We need that. And he has excellent footage that you can use for your personal education, because the Masonic and crime cartels symbolism is universal around the world. So that bit of his work I really support, but I keep a very, very close eye on this guy's conclusions. But I have to say that his conclusions are very unobtrusive. So I you know, support this channel much, much more than I'm wary of it at this point in time. Okay, so please check it out. And, you know, please say also subscribe so that you get all the newest material, but keep a critical eye, okay? Keep a critical eye. Now, my critical eye was towards the end. He's going in the city of London. You can see the gherkin here in the background. And then he comes to some final conclusions about Brexit, okay? So this episode is very good because he's standing in front of Buckingham Palace at some point. So he does this kind of like zoom down to Buckingham Palace, and he questions the entire purpose of the royal family, right? And the fact that they portray themselves to be eternal. Like, you know, they kind of prime people to think that they will always be there, right? This is Buckingham Palace in the background. And he questions that. But then later on, when he's down at the City of London, he says the only true you know, by the way, big whopping X here put into the building. That's also cartel signaling. But when he talks about the City of London, he says that they are the only ones who truly have their existence inscribed in law. And he mentions that in the Magna Carta, in the special independence of the City of London has been mentioned, and he says that is the only thing from the Magna Carta that still survives, whereas other bits of the Magna Carta have been like chipped away and modified and so on. Now, the rights of the City of London predate the Magna Carta, right? Because the Magna Carta was just renewing them. Okay, so this is also evidence for who owns the City of London, because only the Vatican had any sort of rights, property rights in Britain before the Magna Carta. They were the only really big, powerful players, okay? Now, the problem I have with his video is that he kind of implies that the City of London's rights are eternal. So the royalty might not be, but the City of London is. Now, I find this very dangerous, and this is something that also kind of hints to me that this might be something coming out of the MI5 corner, MI6 British intelligence corner, because MI5, MI6, and MI7 are a front organization of the Crown Corporation. And the Crown Corporation has nothing to do with the British family, apart from the fact that they have, you know, blood relations to the head mafiosis who own the Crown Corporation. But really, they are two separate entities. Now, the royal family has their lands and their entire, you know, raison d'etre in the UK. The Crown Corporation is a transnational criminal organization. There will be, even if there isn't today, I predict that there has to be at some point infighting between the European royal families and the European, you know, landed aristocracy or whatever remnants there are, and the Crown Corporation. Okay, now both of them are pretty bad, right? If some royals are more, you know, whacked out than others, some have been more criminal than others, but overall they have been like this, not least because they are family members, right? But at the end of the day, the Crown Corporation has this massive army of Jesuits, right? It's an ancient, grown organization dominated by men recruiting other men, which leads to hyperpsychopathy and homosexuality at the very top. And because homosexuals don't reproduce, they have to kind of groom and recruit other psychopaths. So this is why the Crown Corporation is much more psychopathic than the European royals. Overall, okay, overall. Not necessarily individuals who are really deep inside, but overall, right? So the European royals are stepped down in psychopathy because of this. It's a systems effect, right? The Vatican and the Crown Corporation are pre-selected based on psychopathy and homosexuality, because homosexuality is kind of, and I hope I didn't just say homeopathy by accident just previously. So I mean homosexuality, because only gay guys bonding very closely and sticking together could last in the psychopathic environment at the very top. Okay, This is why there's a pre-selection. It has nothing to do intrinsically with homosexuality. It is just a pre-selection. But once this pre-selection happens, you end up with this highly psychopathic, highly militaristic organization with a lot of gay guys at the top. Okay. Now, the European royals, because they're still families, are one step down in psychopathy. Eventually, as this entire, ancient edifice is breaking apart, the European royals have a chance to get the hell out of this. In fact, they have an incentive because the, highly militaristic gay serial killers in the Crown Corporation and the Vatican Crime Cartel have been feeding off them and have been traumatizing them and their children and actually murdering family members for centuries. So this is now the chance to detach, as this plane is crashing, you kind of have to cut the cord so that you don't crash with them. However, the Crown Corporation is now at the stage and at the size where it has asset stripped all the other continents. The Crown Corporation has asset stripped Far East Asia. It has asset stripped Russia and China. It has asset stripped Africa, right? And Latin America. So now, and Australia a long time ago. So now, where can it really make a lot of money to pay off all the serial killers and thugs and prostitutes as it hired, So the Crown Corporation is a non-stop kind of feeding machine, and it needs to generate profit to be able to pay all the serial killers that they use to gain this amount of power. Now, this is the process that is at the very core driving this non-stop murder and asset stripping machine. But for the European royals, what they need to know is that even though they're financially connected to the Crown Corporation and it looks like they're kind of benefiting from it, when the Crown Corporation wanted to asset strip Russia, it killed the Russian royal family, right? Or at least this is how it seems. And I think, most likely they were all killed. So that's when the Crown Corporation asset stripped Russia. And then, I think 20 million people were genocided in Russia. Then, it also asset stripped China. And again, millions and millions of people were, mass murdered and genocided in China. And all the Chinese leadership was again killed. Now, these were the asset stripping operations in the 20th century where the money was coming from the asset stripping of those regions, right? Now, this beast is coming home because it has run out of things to asset strip. So in order to be able to pay its serial killers, it needs to asset strip the biggest landowners and the biggest, money owners that are left. So the really big things to asset strip are the European royal families and the American billionaires. Now, with the billionaires, the cycle kind of loops around. So the billionaires are recruited up into the organized crime cartel. They are stewards of the Crown Corporation's companies and wealth. And then eventually, the Crown Corporation gets it back and distributes their wealth to poorer serial killers who are on the up and are young and are still in the killing phase. So they can become billionaires. And then the cycle repeats. Now, this endless cycle has been happening and has been done by the Crown Corporation, and it's called the revolution. It's the turning of the wheel. So wherever there was a revolution, like the French Revolution, it was just this process of asset stripping the king and distributing the money and the land to the new serial killers, mafiosis, right, who then became the bourgeoisie and became rich, and then they were asset stripping, blah, 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 blah. This is how it works. That's the revolution. And this is what's symbolized by the snake biting its own tail. Okay, this Vatican symbol of the snake biting its own tail, that's the revolution. But it is ultimately a business plan. It is a business process. What the European royals need to know is that this snake is now biting its own tail here in Europe and here in the US. In the US, they're going after the billionaires. In Europe, they're going after the European royal families. And a long, long time ago, on the Techno Crime Fighters Forum, I already produced evidence for this. Okay? And I have to look up which, let me do it now because this is actually important. Technocrime Fighters Forum. Okay, let me find this. It was in one of the episodes I talked about Royal Ascot. So oh God, let me just find it on the quick. So I did a very big episode analyzing. Let me just find it. I should have brought it up earlier. But okay, so here's the Technocrime Fighters Forum list. Oops, sorry. I want to see the playlist. So give me a second. Okay, let me share my screen and show you. So the evidence was already produced a year ago, but it's super important right now, okay? It's to do with finance. So this is on my channel, there's a playlist called the Technocrime Fighters Forum. And if I scroll down back, it's a long, long time ago. This was about the city of London Dragons National Security Warning. I think this is it, right? I think this is it. Crime Syndicate. Yes, I think this is this. It must be, I think, this one perhaps. About the police. Now, oh God, no. This is about, oh yes, here it is. Okay, I found it. So you guys watch the very end of Technocrime Fighters Forum, episode 18. And it is the last 20 minutes, okay? And it's 3 hours long. And the last 20 minutes, I'm analyzing the advertising for Royal Ascot, okay? Like nowhere else, a place like nowhere else. So I'm analyzing the Royal Ascot adverts, and I'm going through, and especially when I'm analyzing this image here of the golden carriage, they actually say that these were, 300 years in the making.
The defining stage, 300 years in the making.
So the defining stage, 300 years in the making. And it starts off with showing the Masonic double pillars with the pyramid at the top and the little stone cap, or capstone, sorry, the capstone at the top. So the peak of the pyramid right here on the double Masonic double pillars. This is the racetrack. And they say the defining stage, 300 years in the making. Now, if you go back, right, 300 years, you end up with the French Revolution. In other words, what's being put out here in these Royal Ascot adverts, and remember that in the beginning I said that the Crime Cartel communicates with adverts, with music videos, with Hollywood movies, but, it's inverted. Okay, so why the Royal Ascot? It's because the Royal Ascot adverts are not targeted at their lowest level of prostitutes and thugs. They are kind of their, rich, higher up Masons and higher up, criminals and the criminal architecture of the Crown Corporation. They are the people who would be attending Royal Ascot, who would maybe look at the advert and so on. Now, this is why the announcement of the asset stripping of the British royals has been put into the Royal Ascot adverts. And I go through the entire analysis of cartel signaling in the advert. And at the end, what it's telling is that Royal Ascot, that is rich, right, above both ears, put out the same advert twice in a row. The very same advert in 2 years, even though they can afford to make a new advert every year. Why? And if you look at it, the only difference between the two adverts is the last scene. In the first version, you can see a blurred area. And in the final version, that blurred area clears to show the royal family. And it really looks like somebody looking through the visor, or the, whatever you call it, the telescope of a sniper rifle, and, focusing in on the distance, right? And suddenly the image becomes clear. So this is as close to a sniper rifle's, simulation you can get without seriously, attracting attention. So please go back to Technocrime Fighters Forum 18 that was published on the 21st of July 2017, right? So it is a year and a half old. And already a year and a half ago, I made the point that, as far as I can tell, the next stage for the Crown Corporation is to asset strip the European royals and the American oligarchs. And I produced evidence in the form of cartel signaling by pointing to the Royal Ascot adverts, okay? Now, I still stand by that conclusion. And this is why, for example, in the interview with Kevin Annett, I kept bringing up the royals. I know that the royals have been roped in to the child sacrifice and the child rape and so on, right? And I am aware of Jimmy Savile in the UK, you know, who's been supplying children to the royals, it said. And I'm also aware of the Dutroux affair. And Dutroux is kind of like the Jimmy Savile equivalent in Belgium, which seem to have been supplying children to the Belgian royals, right? I'm aware of this. I'm not saying these people are innocent, but what I'm saying is that they too have a next generation who have a choice. They can either go back into the folds of the mafia, which will mean that they will lose everything they have, and their entire family lineage will come, you know, to a stop, maybe in court, maybe rather cataclysmically, or they can migrate out and help to cycle their countries back to health and normality. And I really recommend the second path, because the Vatican for sure is going down, right? And as far as I can tell, John Nash says so, not me. So, you know, that's not a winning proposition. The winning proposition is to value the geniuses in your country, to support them, to actually cycle all universities out of the fucking military brain research, and to switch off 5G and to let your own people think for themselves, right? And for you guys to think for yourselves, meaning the European royals, okay? Now, this is where we are at now. So all the European families and all the entire European aristocracy has this choice. Are you going to go down with the Vatican crime cartel that has, you know, will have the biggest court cases we'll have ever seen, will be shut down as a transnational criminal organization, and will have its entire assets used up to pay damages, right? Are you going to go down with them, or are you going to try to save yourself and your family and your children's reputation? Right? That's what it's about. And it's a family decision here, right? These are royal families. It's a family decision. So for the generation of, for example, Prince William, who is my age, right? They have the choice. They will have to be the ones cycling this shit out, right? Are you going to go down the Jimmy Savile path, which really is not very sexy, not very cool, or are you going to be part of the new Cool Britannia movement of getting the fuck out of the EU, having, you know, your own military, having de-Satanizing your military, you know, de-Masonifying your military, and actually going back to what the UK actually stood for, right? Back in the day when it developed the law, right? This is the path. So are you going to be part of the clear up operation? And are you going to free yourself from the crime cartel? Or are you going to go down with the crime cartel? Now, there's evidence that every single European family has been blackmailed by the by the Crown Corporation. Okay. For example, in another Technocrime Fighters video that I filmed from the Vierwaldstätter See, from the what's it called? Hotel Seehof or something like that. It's like a big 4-star hotel right at the looking to the Rütli, looking to the point where Switzerland was founded. In this big, you know, kick-ass hotel, there are 2 room 7s, you know, room 7 on the 2nd floor and room 7 on the 3rd floor. Room 7 on the 2nd floor was the room where Churchill stayed with his new wife on honeymoon. Room 7 on the 3rd floor, right above it, is where Bush Sr. stayed with his wife on holiday. So that hotel and the view from the hotel is pretty important. So I would say there's a big whooping military bunker complex owned by the Crown Corporation right there, okay? Now, why is all this relevant? It's because when I was staying at this hotel, I also pointed out that as you're going around the lake, on the other side of the lake, right, going towards Lucerne, there is a point where Princess Beatrix died in a car accident, in a very strange car accident. Now, I would say, and this woman was known for her philanthropy, for being very human, very, you know, and she was a woman and so on, and she was in line, right? Now, I think she was murdered, and I think this was human sacrifice. And I think actually the family was forced into sacrificing her, because this is how the Crown Corporation works. It's trying to force parents to kill their own firstborn or one of their designated children as a buy-in into the crime cartel, and as a kind of buying the survival and the prosperity of their children in future. This is how this organized crime cartel has been working. So for me, that was already evidence. You know, really, you have to do the forensic carefully, but for me, that was enough to conclude that that was evidence for, you know, European royal families being blackmailed with actual murder. Because it's a bit, you know, what freaking coincidence that you have this really important lake that seems to have a massive military bunker. So royalty and George Bush and Churchill are all staying there, and then, you know, somebody just happens to die on the summer holiday in a very dramatic, you know, CIA style death. Okay, so this is where we at, right? So this is why all of this stuff matters. Now, getting back to this video I started off with, I'm sorry, it probably seems like I'm rambling today, but for those people who are in the know, I'm going through systematically important parts, and, you know, I'm trying to help you put all these puzzle pieces together. So the blackmail of the European royal families is the reason and the incentive to get the fuck out of this transnational organized crime cartel, right? Which is the Crown Corporation, which is the Vatican, which is the Jesuit network, which is the Masons. So in other words, the royals have to get the fuck out of the Masons, right? And the police forces like the Metropolitan Police and Police Australia, they need new uniforms, and they need to take off the fucking Masonic tiling from their caps. And hospitals, for example, Hospital Liverpool, as a whistleblower has pointed out to me, started having Masonic tiling on their front entrances. That needs to come off, right, for us to stop the organ harvesting and human trafficking in NHS hospitals, because all of these things hang together. Now, this entire process can be done the nasty way, or it can be done the civilized way. The civilized way is if all the European family members have a big family meeting and decide, for the benefit of their children and the survival of their children and for the benefit and health of their countries, to migrate the fuck out of the Masons and the Jesuits and the crime cartel and make their countries a non-Jesuit, non-Masonic zone. Okay, this means they are kicking the organ harvesting, the human trafficking, the pedophilia, the necrophilia, the child abuse, the trafficking through chip implants, the 5G networks, and other forms of human sex trafficking. And they also kick the mind control weapons and so on, right? And they migrate their courts away from the Masonic crime cartel. They get back to the rule of law, as, you know, tracking the fundamental principle, not tracking the parallel system of Masonic law, which is separate from this thing. Okay, this is the crossroads where we at. Now, one of the things that I can say from systems analysis, and that is 100% backed up by, in my view, the best financial advisor in the world, Catherine Austin Fitz. She says that we have the potential for immeasurable wealth generation, right? If we get things right. Now, from systems analysis, I can tell that we are on the way down. So anybody who starts going up because the system is collapsing will, in relative terms, start doing incredibly well. And they will experience an uplift that will be supercharged by everything else collapsing, you know. So as things are going down rapidly, anybody who can stay course or go up a bit will do, you know, incredibly well. But if we all do it together, we can all start going up and really have incredibly mind-blowing wealth generation, well-being, and a lot of that. And frankly, we don't need the abuse. We don't need the child abuse. It was an ancient system of buy-in and generating control files to keep it all together. But the point is, systems analysis says if we are all tracking the Carnot cycle, and I can make a video about that, the Carnot cycle in any engine is the most efficient. There's no way to get more profit or more benefit or more energy from any machine than if you're close to the Carnot cycle. You can never achieve it perfectly because that's just a theoretical upper limit. But in human systems, the rule of law is tracking the Carnot cycle. Okay, if you follow the rule of law, it is the most just and most stable and most efficient way for your society to run. Of course, if you are a criminal and you have rule of law around you, you can make a lot of profit, but that is only if you've got a small admixture of criminals. They can then get more profit out of the system if they steal and get away with it. However, if everybody steals and get away with it, which is what we're in now, then you're not anywhere near the Carnot cycle. So the entire efficiency and well-being goes down. You end up in a third world country. You end up in what's generally called as a shithole, right? So if you don't want to end up in a shithole, you need to start migrating back up, and you need to start tracking the Carnot cycle in systems physics terms. In real plain English terms, you need to put back the rule of law. So that's how it all hangs together. So all the European royals can now have this choice. Do they want to continue having their family members blackmailed and murdered? Or can they all have one big family get together and think, right, that is it. We are canceling the contracts. Because remember, these are just contracts. They are commercial contracts. Don't be fooled by this absolute claim of canon law, right? And the Vatican architecture. They are not representatives of God, right? And they are, if anything, representative of what we would call holy shit, right? So we don't need that. And these are just contracts that can be cancelled. Okay, you need to cancel the commercial contract. You need to cancel the, whatever it's called, ownership contract. That means that the City of London belongs to this transnational criminal organization called the Vatican, right? And the Catholic Church. No, you have to say, sorry, that contract was unconscionable to start with. You're now being declared an international or transnational organized criminal organization according to international law. The City of London, your property, will be dissolved, and the profits from the City of London are going to be used to pay damages to the British people, right? This actually is a much more effective way. Okay, this is what we need to do. But right now, we're in this infighting between the Crown Corporation wanting to get rid of and asset strip the royals, as it's expressed by the Ascot adverts. See Techno Crime Fighters Forum episode 18 for more. That is the Masons and the Crown Corporation saying, oh, these are the defining stage, 300 years in the making. In other words, the asset stripping of the British royals has been planned since the Vatican Crime Corporation has asset stripped the French king 300 years ago. And then in the 20th century, they asset stripped the Russian royal family, which by today's terms was highly cultured and highly civilized, as far as I know, right? They kind of seemed sane, which is probably why they went. Now, this is it, right? So the Crown Corporation is putting out the advert for Ascot saying, yeah, it's defining stage, 300 years in the making. And then they have all this like display of orgasmic, the feast, you know, and blah, blah, blah. So they will feast the satanic criminals will feast on the European royal family. Now, this is the backstory. Now, while I am not a royalist or supporter of the pedophilia and the, stuff that has been going on in the royal families, I know from a systems analysis point of view that the next generation has to help us. They have a choice. Are they going to do the bullshit their grandparents were forced to do? Or are they all going to get together, the cousins and, third cousins, and say, no, let's just fuck this shit, right? I mean, can Prince William look at, Prince George and say, is this the future I want for him, right? Do we want to be known as the family supporting kiddie fucking while we're raising our own toddlers? Do we really want to look like the Nazis? Because it will be all over Twitter within a nanosecond, right? I mean, modern day, this kind of stuff just explodes over the planet, right? So it's impossible to keep up appearances. Or do we want to be known for the generation that actually, got out of this morass for the first time in millennia? Now, this is what every single royal family and the entire frickin' European aristocracy has to think about. And this is serious and this is dangerous because the Crown Corporation has just announced that it wants to kill you all, right? Just like the rest of your population, they want to kill you all. Okay, now if you don't believe me, you can go to Deagle list of countries, right? And I've just found this really neat list that I want to show you guys, because I always pointed to the Deagle.com country pages individually, but I found a list. So if you go to Deagle.com country and then forecast.aspx, you will see this list of countries and you can actually see the population forecast. Okay, now all the ones that are highlighted red, that's the genocide countries. So here in the United States, for example, the black number, the 326 million, is the current population number, and the one in red is the population number for 2025. This is 6 years away. And I can prove to you that this is what it is by clicking on the country. So it says population here, 327 million. And this was in the year 2017. Now the forecast for 2025 is 100 million. So 227 million Americans will die in the next 6 years, right? Now that has to do with satellite-based directed energy weapons and with the integrated weapon system known as 5G, okay? Now 5G and the satellite weapons are set, and the weaponized gangstalker cars are set to kill 227 million people over the next 6 years. So you can divide 227 million by 6 and find out how many people will be silently killed off every year. And then you can get the number for every month and every week. Okay, pretty big stuff. But for the European countries like France, they want to murder 48 million people because it's going to go from 67 million to 39. Italy, going from 62 million to 43, right? And you will notice that the only countries going up or staying are elsewhere, like Mexico, Indonesia, Brazil, right? Russia, fairly stable, but that means they have to kill some people. India is, going up. China going down. China going down, but not that much. So maybe it's just aging. But remember, what I said is that the global crime cartel has been relocating to Asia and Far East, right? So Europe is this is why Europe is to be genocided. France, Italy, Canada here, even South Korea, the Netherlands, they're all being genocided. Okay? Here, Germany going from 80 million to 28 million in 6 years. Now, how is that possible, please? Right? So 62 million people are going to be killed within 6 years. This means it's over 1 million people per year are going to be killed in Germany. Sorry, did I cock that up? Sorry, I said 60. God, I'm an idiot. I said 60 million people in 6 years. So that's 10 million people per year in Germany. 10 million people per year in Germany are going to be killed off. And funnily enough, Germany has one of the highest numbers of targeted individuals. Okay, so please have a look at the list here. Vietnam is doing well. Spain is going down. Australia to be reduced from 23 million to 15 million. Poland from 38 million to 33 million, and so on. Within 6 years, guys, this is not just old people popping their clogs. Okay? Now, what you'll notice is that the countries with a royal family are being genocided. Now, when you're a royal family, you're kind of tied to your local area. So when your people start dying, that's really bad for you. Your power is shrinking, it's imploding because your economy is imploding, your population is imploding, the people who can work for you are imploding. So in other words, what I'm saying is that the survival of the European royal families are tied to the survival of their population. This is not the case for the Crown Corporation because it's global. It has already relocated to Far East Asia. And I made the point, for example, that traditionally over the last couple of millennia, the HQ of the Crown Corporation, of the Crime Cartel, was Switzerland, this big sprawling bunker complex. At the moment, the Swiss are extremely snooty and are gunning me because they still haven't understood that they too will be genocided. So Switzerland has 8 million people and they want to take them down to 5. So 3 million people are going to be killed off in the next 6 years. For a very small country, this is devastating. Now, you also have chemtrailing and spraying above Switzerland. So the entire food system is being poisoned, even though they don't know it, right? The entire skiing economy can be made to go poof with HARP like that, right? So, and a lot of other things can happen. They are sitting on a tectonic fault on the Alps, so they can be devastated with earthquakes and nobody will be any wiser. Nobody will think HARP, you know? So the Swiss can be devastated even inside their military bunkers, and they don't know it. They still think they're ruling the planet, which is why I got such a snooty reception in the military HQ in Bern talking to Intel, and I even got a complimentary death threat from them. So thank you. But so they still haven't understood, and I was trying to make the point to them that the Himalayas are like Switzerland and the Swiss Alps, just bigger and better and even more inaccessible and even more space for military bunkers. So if you want to control, billions of people, you need a bigger military sprawling complex. So Switzerland is getting a bit too small. And this explains the Swiss genocide that is being planned and the Swiss chemtrailing. And also the weaponized cars that keep shooting me in the head every single time I leave my house, right? And the satellite weapons pointed at me in Switzerland. So the Swiss military doesn't have really, they have a problem. I mean, unless they have all second homes in, somewhere in Shanghai, or in the Philippines or in Thailand, perhaps that's what they're planning. They're like, okay, in 6 years' time, we'll just say goodbye to this property here and we'll just fuck off and live in the Far East, right? But I guess the cartel might have plans for you, maybe you just don't fit in there. I'm not sure how long you will survive. So I'm trying to make this point to the fucking Knights Templar here that if they want to survive, they too need to get their head out of their ass. Okay, now let's put all this together. My problem started, right? So hopefully now you understand. My problem started with this video here. So I've got this guy criticizing in the first half the royal family standing in front of Buckingham Palace, right, and making remarks about the how silly it is that the royal family's guard is now blowing the trumpet and so on, and how silly it is that the people of Britain still value the royal family. And in the second half of the video, he's in the city of London and he's saying the only place that actually has rights in ancient law is the City of London. I'm sorry, son, you've got it the wrong way round. You've got it the wrong way round. Okay? It's the City of London that needs to be dissolved and shut down first, because it is a transnational criminal organization. And yes, of course, the British royals are in on it, right? I mean, I think they're banking with Coutts, which is, I think, also registered or headquartered in the City of London. So you can already tell that their money is being actually handled by the Vatican Bank, right? But what really counts is that they're still a family, okay? They still have plans to hang around and show their face to the Brits. Now, this is where we need to start as we're shutting down these ancient organized crime cartels. So this is why I strongly suspect this guy to actually work for MI5, because MI5 to this day is still working for the Crown Corporation, not for the British royal family. And that would explain why he's criticizing the royals, priming you to think that the City of London is there with its, legal permanence. And it would explain why he strikingly looks like Benedict Cumberbatch, right, from the Sherlock movies here, like an investigator who's a genius and you would trust him, right? All this subtle priming, right, all fits together. And I just would like to say, if this guy's really working for MI5, I would say to MI5 and MI6, fuck you guys. Okay, so now that I got this out of the way, I also would like to say you are banking on the losing proposition. The winning proposition is to go with the royal family. The winning proposition is for all the intelligence agencies to cut the cord to the Crown Corporation. But that means you need to reconstitute yourselves, because right now you're still property owned by the Crown Corporation. And by the way, all you MI5 and MI6 agents are chipped and you are hooked up to the computer infrastructure of the Vatican Crime Cartel. But you need to get the fucking chips out of yourselves, guys. You need to kick fucking synthetic telepathy, because it's just going to turn your brain to mush. And you need to get the fuck out of this. If anything, you need to stick with the royals, right? And if you don't, there are mechanisms to actually have you executed for high treason, right? So get on the case now, right? But this is super important for everybody to understand. Now, when I was listening to this, right, in the very beginning, this guy is making points about the EU, and he's pointing out the broadcasting that the British media is doing from outside Westminster. And this is all pro-Brexit, pro-state, pro-EU, This is the entire brainwash by MI7 is pro-EU. And he's pointing at these signs, stuck up here saying better together, and then he says that this has been, it's called the sodomaction.co.uk, but Sodom like sodomy. And then he says this is probably a much better expression of what the EU actually is. Absolutely hilarious. Exactly, I mean, look at these signs. We already have the best deal. No, you don't. No, you don't, because you have tied yourself to another transnational criminal organization known as the European Union. What hasn't been said about the European Union, and this is actually the only thing that really matters, is what is in the presentation of Christopher's story, which is the pen name of Edward Hull. This guy, who it looks like has been murdered, right? Now, please go to the video called the EU Corruption Full Documentary. In this video, right, you will hear how the accountants of the European Union have not signed the books of the European Union since the mid-1990s because so much money has been stolen. That is the only thing you need to know about, the European Union, guys, okay? So briefly, let me just, okay, I can still see that the people in the chat are making very good comments. They are mentioning the Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst, the DVD, right? Excellent, it's all tying in, that's right. You also mentioned, you talk about Brexit, so it means that you guys can still hear me. Thank you. Thank you for hanging in there. Now, what you have to understand with all of this is that the European Union project was set up by the victors of the Second World War. The victors of the Second World War were the Masons, which are front for the Vatican military intelligence arm known as the Jesuits. Okay, so the Vatican won. The Vatican started, conducted, and not surprisingly won the First and Second World War. And these were asset stripping operations. Now, when they put in place the EU, it was to continue the asset stripping operation. And this is, for example, why when the euro came in, certainly the Deutschmark, okay, Deutsche Mark, went in value, in real terms, down to a half. So at the time, I was just an undergraduate in the UK, so I had this conversion from German Deutsche Mark to British pounds, and then later euros to British pounds. And I was just stunned. I would come home from university, right? And I would realize, holy cow, before a coffee cost 2 Deutschmark 50, and now a coffee costs €2.50. Previously, good shoes were about 60 or 70 Deutschmarks, you know. Now good shoes are 60 to 70 euros, but it was 2 Deutschmark to €1. So everything became twice as expensive, you know, but the income didn't double. So what happened is that in the transit from Deutschmark to the euro, everybody's wealth was just cut in half. Poof, like that. And nobody complained. I mean, if somebody would have come, one of the politicians would have come and said, look, we guys are working for the Vatican Crime Cartel, and we really want to fuck you Germans now, just because we can. So what we're going to do is over the next 2 years or 3 years, we're going to double all the prices, and there's nothing that you guys can do. And as a matter of fact, you will really love it because the new euro notes look really cool. If anybody would have said that, they would have, I don't know what, be lynched, you know, by an angry mob. But because they didn't say it and instead they just did it, that's exactly what happened. People love the euro. Because, oh yeah, you know, you don't have to do all the complicated maths when you're on holiday, so that's so much better. Yeah, but late, you know, in the olden days when you went on holiday, you had twice as much money. You know, so was it worth it? So in other words, after they had smashed Germany to pieces, right, killed millions of people in the Second World War, they put the European Union in place to continue the asset stripping by other means. Okay? And they used the fact that most normals were so exhausted by the psychopathy and mass murder of the Second World War, they didn't have the will to resist. And they didn't have the means and the military means to resist. But what I'm trying to tell you guys is that the euro, first of all, fucked over everybody in Europe. And it also fucked over those countries which don't really have the euro, you know, like Sweden or Switzerland or Britain. Nobody won from this. And everybody's wealth has just collapsed, you know. So this is what you have to understand about the European Union. It's an asset stripping operation that has been put in place by the Vatican Crime Cartel. So when you have this guy on the one hand, you know, say that Brexit is actually a good thing, but then say, okay, the ancient rights of the City of London, he doesn't understand he's talking about the same freaking entity, right? I mean, you can't have one with the other, okay? What you need to know about the European Union is that its own accountants refused to sign the books since the mid-1990s because they were so fraudulent. So no accounting company wants the liability, which was run into the many, many billions of having signed false books. Okay, now you can make a rough calculation how many billions could have possibly gone missing, and I think you would end up with trillions. Meanwhile, in the United States, Catherine Austin Fitts uncovered the so-called black budget, where again, 21 to 43 trillion went missing. Now, the European Union, the EU, is the European version of the black budget. This is what you have to understand. It's just that in Europe, it's official. Okay? So Brexit is getting out of the black budget. Brexit is kind of like putting a firewall, a financial firewall between the people of Britain and their tax money and the other countries. And what we need is we need systemic firewalls. Okay, if we want to dice up the octopus, we need firewalls. We need them in cyberspace, right? We need them also in financial space. We need them in the economies, right? We need areas to be kind of protected for all of our survival, because if we all go down, there's nowhere to flee. Okay, so this is what we have to do. This is what this is about. And this is how Brexit and the EU tie together with the black budget in the US. They are the same mechanism by the same transnational organized criminal organization. So if you don't know, if you are in Europe and you know all about the European Union, you know, and you don't know anything about the US black budget, let me get onto the black budget. If you're in the US and you think, what the fuck has the EU got to do, you know, what has to do with us in the US, let me get onto the black budget in the US. Okay, and I'm telling you, you guys need to watch each other, because you are suffering from exactly the same thing. So now, if you're in the US, please also quote and study. Oops, sorry, I went to the wrong screen. I wanted to go here. Please study what's happening in Europe, because the same shit will be pulled in the US. And sometimes it's easier to understand it elsewhere, because you're not as emotionally involved and you're much more objective. Everybody, please, if you haven't so, please watch this interview or this speech by Edward Hull or Christopher Story, called EU Corruption. Please like the video, okay? And by the way, liking the video also signals to MI5 and GCHQ and the NSA that yes, we've watched it and we liked it, right? We are aware. Now there's this, you know, before I get on the black budget, let me make this point, because it's important as well. There's this fear of surveillance. Now, we already know we can't stop the surveillance, you know, so now we have to use the surveillance. We need to let them know what we think. And we need to scare them by letting them know how many of us think that. Because MI5 and MI6, they're kind of Weasley buggers, okay? They are going to go with the winning party. So if you keep signaling your numbers and how winning you are, they're going to go with you and cut ties with the Vatican crime cartel. If you're all going to be like quiet, you know, weak, mousy people who never like anything and never with self-confidence say, yeah, in your fucking face, even if you hack my computer for liking this video, I'm still going to like the video. Unless you keep signaling at them, they will not see your numbers and they will not see that you're the winning proposition. You know, so it's kind of like a reverse psyop to say, yeah, in your fucking face. We know about this stuff. We like it. And we're moving towards the rule of law. It's a dominance display. So liking our videos and bashing the GCHQ and NSA troll factories and the trolls that appear everywhere is a dominance display. And the more of us do it, the more we will show that we're the winning proposition. Okay? That's why it's very important to like videos and support everybody. So on to the black budget. So this is the European black budget that's being discussed here by this investigator, who, by the way, also in the very same speech talks about trying to shut down HSBC and trying to shut down the criminal operation of the American banks, which are not really American banks. They are foreign-owned banks, and they're actually incarnations of the Vatican Bank. Okay, but I think this is why he was murdered, because he was actually, you know, snapping away at the heels of the bankers. Now, with regards to the US black budget, very, very important to know this, okay? This is the US incarnation of this. And this is, you know, best presented by Catherine Austin Fitts in this presentation, this interview on Greg Hunter's USA Watchdog. And it's called "The Federal Government is Running a Secret Open Bailout." Okay, with Greg Hunter, I would recommend you click subscribe and you click the bell down here to get notified, because he's interviewing very good people, and Catherine Austin Fitts is on very often, and she has really got the insight. Now, let me play you a clip so that you understand what this is about. Let me turn up the volume. I hope you can hear it.
To answer legitimate questions about that 21 trillion, taking the documents down on the website, then when they discovered that we already had them, putting them back up, producing statements that are supposed to explain the 21 trillion when every number in it is redacted, saying, don't worry about the problem, we're going to do an audit. Then, oh, well, I guess we failed the audit, even though we spent almost $1 billion on doing the audit.
So what she's talking about is financial investigators trying to go after the 21 missing trillion from the, you know, US Treasury alone. 21 trillion are missing. So this is about these missing 21 trillion. And what she describes is that the government is taking documents down to cover their tracks. And as she put it, when they discovered that the investigators already had the documents, they put them back up to kind of cover up the fact that they wanted to do a cover up, right? Then they do fake investigations themselves. And then when the investigation fails, they kind of brush that under the carpet. So these are the routines of a criminal organization, right? This is what she's describing. But what this is about, it's the missing money that the global crime cartel will use to genocide you, to genocide and murder the oligarchs, the American billionaires, and also the European royal families. This money is sloshing around the world at high speed, and we have no control over it because it's entirely siphoned off into the Vatican bank. So this is the 21 trillion we're talking about. It's the 21 trillion that will be used to kill you and your family. Okay? Now let's see how it continues.
So there's been a whole progression of the government doing the, you know, the dance and the shuffle on their refusal to obey to the constitutional provisions on and the financial management laws about, for example, producing audited financial statements. So the question was, how do they deal with this once and for all? My guess is you probably saw some of the leadership at Treasury, whether it's Brady, Rubin, Summers, sit down. Wouldn't surprise if they pulled Volcker in as well and say, okay, how are we going to fix this once and for all?
By the way, the list of names you should write down, because these are criminals. These are identified criminals, because when you find out what they've just pulled off, you will know that these are members of a criminal syndicate robbing the Americans and using the robbed money to kill the Americans. So let's just hear the list of names she just mentioned.
My guess is you probably saw some of the leadership at Treasury, whether it's Brady, Rubin, Summers, sit down. Wouldn't surprise if they pulled Volcker in as well and say, okay, how are we going to fix this once and for all?
So remember the names, guys. Remember the names she's just listed. Those are the criminals you need to go after.
And the decision was to produce a statement from the Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board, a private group of accounting experts who advise the government, to come up with a policy that authorizes the federal government, you know, in complete defiance of the Constitution, in complete defiance of the financial management laws, to basically move certain things behind secret books. So the federal government, including all the covered agencies and up to, I think it's 156 related agencies, are now permitted to keep secret books, and we're not allowed to know who makes those decisions, by what process they make it. All we know is they can have secret books, which means that the books we see are, frankly, totally meaningless.
So guys, did you understand what she just told you, right? So what she told you is that in the US, there has been this meeting of essentially criminals in the Treasury, giving the criminal network endless amount of money, Okay, now the connection is that you have the treasury accounts, and typically because they're accounts, they have to be accounted for. That's the whole point of fucking accounts. Okay, you account for the money. Now the point is that these have now been pushed behind the veil, and any accounts, or non-accounts rather, the money behind this veil doesn't need to be accounted for anymore. And as she put it, there was, the Treasury got together with experts from the private sector. Now, when the state comes together with private companies and members of, or people from the private sector to steal the money of the taxpayer, this is called a fascist takeover. Fascism is the merging of the state and the private corporate powers. Now, the fascist merger has happened a long, long time ago and resulted in the Crown Corporation. But you have more and more of these fascist tendencies and fascist expressions of this fascist system in the US. So the fact that the Treasury called in members of the private sector, so-called experts, and made a panel to figure out how to steal the money of the American taxpayers, that is a fascist coup. Okay, that is the very definition of a fascist coup. So Catherine Austin Fitts just told you there has been a fascist coup in the US, and she has listed the key fascist criminals. Okay, you have to understand this, and you have to know that that is going to lead to as much money as these criminals want to be siphoned off. And she also explained to you that in this criminal conspiracy are involved the entire covert agencies, as in the intelligence agencies, right? As in the CIA and the NSA. In other words, she just told you they are all in on it. So, all these people at the US Treasury have formed a private criminal enterprise in a fascist coup to rob you all. And it is NSA, CIA, the FBI, and then 156, covert organizations. You need to find out who these 156 covert organizations are and who's in their leadership. You need to arrest them, right? You need to arrest them for financial fraud and for high treason. And you need to know that this is the amount of money that, was used to build up the space weapon system that's now being aimed at you and will mass murder you like the people in California, right? So the directed energy weapon laser system that has been basically rubbing out houses down to the fundament, the actual base of the house, that weapon system can be aimed at any one of you in Europe or in the US, or I think probably anywhere in the world. But, the power of that weapon system, of the weaponry, has been already demonstrated in 9/11. An entire 2 high-rises can be just made to puff into thin air in a ludicrously short amount of time. And an entire area, in California, where the wildfires happened that didn't really burn any forests, but only, rubbed out houses. Now, a big area like that can also be just made to puff into thin air like that very quickly. So you have the demonstration, and this black budget, the so-called New Green Deal, is how the mass murder will be financed. Okay. Now, if you want to find out, I'm sorry, I need to stop talking. If you want to find out who is, orchestrating the financial side of the mass murder, it's the people she just listed. Okay. Now, if you're in Europe and you think, what the fuck has this got to do with me? Well, I tell you, the satellite system that's being controlled by the Air Force Space Command, the US Space Command at Air Force Base Schriever, as revealed by Richard Lighthouse, right, who's actually mapped the entire general leadership. Now, that satellite weapon system controlled from the US is aimed at you in Europe. and it's going to be shooting you in the head like it's shooting me in the head. It can give you an instant stroke. It can instantly kill you and your family members and kill your pets and, you know, raise your house to the ground within less than an hour. That's why you need to care. And the reason why we all need to come together now is because the monetary flow, the disappearing money from the European Union and the disappearing money from the US Treasury, they are going to the same place. They're going into this transnational criminal organization known as the Vatican, or the Catholic Church, and all the other front organizations, for example, Scientology or the CIA. You know, these are, and MI6 and the KGB, they are all front organizations of this thing. Okay, so for the future, how the fuck to get out of this? Number one, the European royals need to have a big fat family meeting where they all come together and they decide to kick the Crown Corporation. You know, they need to kick out the Vatican from their countries. That is step number one, right? Now they have the education, I hope, the family connections, and traditionally kind of means to get control over their militaries, and they have to do that. The European army is not good news. A European army means that the Crown Corporation will be conducting a European genocide, assisting the Air Force Space Command. That's what it means. Okay. Now, 5G is also a weapon system. You must not have 5G in your home. My personal thought about 5G is that it's controlling. It's, first of all, you know, a kill machine, but it can also interface with the chips and the non-consensual unknown implants that the children might have, and it can actually take them over. It can take over your family members and use your family members to kill you at home in your sleep. And this includes especially your children, because they've been hooked up to the computer system by interfacing nonstop with their mobile phones, right? And you probably didn't realize, but the screen and the radiation was interfacing with chip implants that you probably didn't know that your kids have, but they do. So that's the connection. Also remember this thing, what was it called again? I forgot the name, but there was this little app on the phone where you could hunt monsters. Like, you know, you could film them, whatever it's called, Go something, not GoPro, that's the, you know, camera thing, but something like that, you know what I mean. You basically used your phone, and then you went around town, and at some point monsters would be appearing, and then you would be capturing them and so on. Now, with that, you could find monsters and hunt for monsters in your own home, and you didn't realize, but you used your camera to film the inside of your home. This is being fed into a supercomputer simulation, right? Whereby, you know, your children can be trained up at night using the software that's also going into computer games to do little military training and turn them into super soldiers. So if your kid has to be navigated by AI to go upstairs to your bedroom and stab you to death at night, military style, this is how it would be done. Okay? They would use the footage from the inside of your home to kind of complement whatever they have through X-ray surveillance, right, of your general area, to make a 3D model of your home and train your family members at night when they're sleeping with their head chips how to kill you in your sleep at home. And the murderers would wake up not remembering anything. Okay, so this is how it all hangs together, and this exactly is how you can kill millions of people within 6 years, you know? So in other words, if you want to stop this, let's go through the moves again. The European royal families need to get their head out of their ass, and especially they need to get their head out of their ass of the Crown Corporation by yesterday, right? The entire aristocracy, well, I don't really hold my hopes very high, but, you know, those people who are not totally degenerate, they need to get, you know, back to what the aristocracy was actually originally, which is a defense installation, right? You guys have the education, the connections, and the means to make shit move. right? Now you need to start doing that. You need to use your education, your connections, and your wealth to make stuff move the right direction. We also need to break up the European Union, because it's the bigger the pool of money, the bigger the pool of money that gets stolen, and the more money will be there to kill us, okay? Now, the Europeans need to start caring about the US black budget, and the Americans need to start caring about what's happening with Europe. We all need to realize that Brexit is not about, oh, but will we be able to travel really easily just using our driving license to Mallorca? This is not what this is about. Brexit is, will we be able to survive the next 6 years or not? You know? So with Brexit, we need financial firewalls. We need real crime-fighting firewalls around the country, right? You also need to put the focus of the intelligence agencies back onto the national scale, onto the protection of the Brits, as opposed to the rape and human trafficking of the Europeans, which is what they're doing with me. MI5 and MI6 has to use women like me, has to stop using women like me to make control files for UK Supreme Court judges, as they tried with Lord Sumption and me. So the both of us need to be intelligent enough to kick that shit. Okay, I need to be intelligent enough not to sue Lord Sumption, and he needs to be intelligent enough to put his legal brain into helping how the fuck to migrate the entire UK out of this shit, right? I think together we can pull it off. Now, MI6 needs to be shut down in its current incarnation and needs to come back as a security installation for the well-being of the Brits. Not national security, because the nation is the nation of Masons traditionally. No, we had enough of that. MI5 has to be there for all the people of the UK. In other words, MI5 in its new incarnation would have had to avert the mass murder of the disabled people as it happened in the UK, right? That would have been the job of Andy Parker. The fact that I'm here barking about that as a Hungarian with German nationality living in Switzerland is frankly a big, fat, fucking embarrassment to Andrew Parker from Churchill College, Cambridge, right? He is a fucking dropout. Well, what the hell do you expect from a tab? But anyway, right? So we need to cycle this. Now, for the British people, they need to understand the true importance of Brexit. It's about averting the genocide. It's about pulling out of the European army, and you guys need to get on to reading your own judges, the good stuff that came out of your judges, right? Like Tom Bingham, the rule of law, like Lord Wolfe, the plain English campaign. You need to start to get to know your Supreme Court judges. You need to know their personalities. You need to know their opinions, and you need to know their so-called dicta, right? And their pronouncements and official, mumblings, right? You need to know what they were saying. So I watched the Supreme Court live channel for about a year, and I got to know the individual personalities as best as I could. And with time, I could kind of predict what each of them is going to say, what questions they will have, what will be important for them, and so on, right? Now, you all need to do that kind of stuff. So people in the US need to know the US Supreme Court judges. You need to know where the corrupt fuckers are. And the UK people need to know the UK Supreme Court. Now, the Anglo-Saxon courts are very important because they rule over large parts of planet Earth, right? Now, the Germans don't know, but their Verfassungsgericht is, well, as the name already says, it's a fraud because Germany doesn't have a Verfassung. So it's called the Constitutional Court, and Germany famously doesn't have a constitution. It has so-called basic rule or Grundgesetz, basic law, and doesn't have a constitution because the Germans forgot to write one. Yeah. So this is where we need to all go. Okay. And we all need to start caring about finance. You all need to know, who Edward Hull was, Christopher Story. You need to know what he said in that lecture. We need to find out who murdered him. If he died in the UK, it would be the fault of the head of MI5 at the time, and he would know who killed him. Because this person, Edward Hull, was such an important person. He was working internationally. So MI6 would have known who killed him. They would have kept an eye on him. like gang stalkers keep an eye 24/7 on me, right? And we all need to wisen up to these sort of things. So that's your homework this weekend. If you're a victim, don't forget to fill out the tick box affidavit as well, right? So this is pretty big homework. So to remind you, if you want to get the affidavit, you go to, hang on, let me share my screen. You go to stop007.org and you click the first link, which is the final affidavit form is out with explanatory notes. This is the first link. You click it here, and then you go to this. You can have a look. This is the view only PDF file. You can see what it's like. And you need to download these 3 documents, the explanatory notes. This is open office format. This is what you fill out, the middle bit, and this is the PDF format, okay? And then there's a guide to filling it out, and I just realized I need to link the first preparatory video about this, okay? So all the victims, you need to start filling this out. I need more affidavits from the UK because I'm preparing my court case. And as we are filling out the affidavits, we need to learn about finance. We need to learn about the rule of law. We need to follow the judges and all that. And we need to shut down the Vatican crime cartel. That's the homework for the weekend. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you had a pleasant breakfast, and I hope you enjoyed your coffee and your tea, and let's get to work. Bye for now.